Hi, I'm Amanda Jane, and welcome to the Communicate with Confidence podcast. My aim is to take the fear out of communicating and make it easy and fun. On this podcast, I'm going to be talking about everything to do with good communication, how we can connect with our audience, get better at speaking and giving presentations, increase visibility, and ultimately get more sales. I'll also be talking to some incredible people about their business, and I'll be getting their insights on how they view communication and how comfortable they are showing up in person and on social media. So let's get started. Hello everyone, and welcome to the Communicate with Confidence podcast. I'm your host Amanda Jane, and today I have with me Zoe Willis. Hello Zoe.
Hello, Amanda. Good evening. Good evening.
Thank you for joining me. You're a family food consultant from realliferealkitchen.com, is that right?
Yes, that's correct, indeed.
And what do you do?
So I essentially help mainly busy mums, helping them to cook well and live well, because over the years, people have actually lost the skills of being able to just walk into a kitchen, look at various ingredients in a cupboard or in the fridge, and just put things together. Life has got so busy that food has fallen by the wayside, and often meal times and creating that space for family has also fallen by the wayside. So I come in and help those mothers, mainly mothers, although I help anybody who needs my assistance, those mums who just go, oh, I know something can change and I need help changing that within the kitchen. So I come in and work, I suppose, a kitchen coach, if you will. I'm helping these families become more efficient with their time and also just learning how to cook and live a better life again.
That sounds absolutely incredible, and we will talk more about that later on. And for the moment, do you have a favorite motivational song?
Favorite motivational song? I have to admit, I have 5 very, very lively children. I don't need like a power ballad. I don't need a Bonnie Tyler in my life. So what I tend to go for is actually more kind of calming music. So the thing I kind of actually switched on is, do you remember the film Shine from years ago? There is a beautiful, beautiful song by Vivaldi, Nulla in Mundo Pax Sincera, and it's just this beautiful 18th century soprano cutting across the violins, and ah, that's just something that fills my soul. So yes, it's complete opposite to Bonnie Tyler, but yes, feeds me when I need it most.
It sounds blissful.
Yeah, I'll give you the link for the show notes, and then everybody can enjoy that.
Yes, I need to start compiling that playlist. Oh, it sounds absolutely blissful. And what about a motivational quote?
Well, there was Pope Benedict XVI. He had a cracker of a quote, and he said, "You were not born for comfort, you were born for greatness." And this is something that I keep on remembering. Life, we have our tricky moments in life, and we can either go, "Oh, this is terrible. Why is this happening to me? This is really, we can have that self-pity, or we can go, "Yep, okay, this is really hard. What's the greatness that's going to come out of this? How can I grow? What's going to happen?" We can kind of flip it around and look at these terrible, terrible situations, these hard situations, much more positively. And it just, I find having that phrase in my mind, it just again gives this kind of encouragement and enthusiasm for life again, even in those tricky moments. So yes, so there you go. Most unexpected. Pope Benedict XVI.
That's so interesting, because nothing good comes easy, does it? If
No.
anything that's worth having is worth working for.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, oh, I love that. Yeah,
Yeah, it's a good one. It's a powerful one, that
it
one.
really
So
is. And it's one of those ones that just stops you in your tracks when
mm,
you have to ponder it for a while.
mm, mm.
Thank you for that. And what about a book? And it doesn't have to be motivational. I just like to know what people read.
I've got sort of 2 authors, I suppose. So I quite like, so we're going from Benedict XVI, we're going to Terry Pratchett. I do
Uh-huh.
like Terry Pratchett, the satire, the language, ever so witty. And I've been reading him for about 30 years, but every time I go back in, there's extra layers.
Mm-hmm.
He's just brilliant. Second one is actually Georgette Heyer, and she was a 20th century writer who would write not costume dramas, but period dramas,
Mm-hmm.
kind of Jane Austen style ones, but brilliant, exciting, fantastic, dashing men in flowing shirts and women who are going off to Tunbridge Wells and meeting these dashing men, and they're just great. I can't put them down, and I actually have to be quite restricted because you just these are these wonderful novels that you just inhale. Yeah, so they're very, very enjoyable. So again, two sorts there.
Lovely, and the ones that you get lost in. Interesting about Terry Pratchett, his readership is very, very loyal, and I've never read anything, but anytime I've ever met a fan of his, they're extremely loyal, and they do reread, and that fascinates me. I must try, but
it's really interesting. Again, as I was saying, I come back to him and I'm going, wow, he was writing in the 90s and the noughties, but there's a lot of, it's the word prescience. He's writing about things that are kind of happening now. It's really fascinating. So yes, and very, very funny. Very funny. Some blue moments as well. But yeah, great fun.
And that would be me bursting out laughing at 1 a.m. while my husband's asleep. That's
the
kind of book I love, when you're just trying to stifle a laugh, or on a train when you're...
Yes, exactly.
Oh wow, that sounds incredible. Thank you for that. So on to business. So can you share your leadership journey and some key milestones that have shaped your career? And I suspect it's going to be quite interesting.
I think it will be, as my background, I've actually got a PhD in medieval history of art. And so that was most of my 20s, was working on that and working in archives and putting footnotes together and doing all that sort of thing. I did have plans to join the civil service, and then I had a baby. So my leadership journey has been quite micro. I have been at home for the past 12, almost 13 years now, running a household that's been getting bigger and bigger and bigger. I've been home educating, so that's also been a huge part of our lives. But what's been so fascinating with this journey is meeting a lot of mums in the toddler groups, and then at school at one stage, meeting a lot of mums who are quite lonely. Actually, we're losing community and support for mums, and so for me to be at home is increasingly unusual. But also for me to be at home with so many children, cooking from scratch, you'd think that would be quite sort of boring and uninteresting. But I've had so many women coming to me and say, oh, how do you cook this? How do you do that? A few years ago, we went gluten-free for health reasons, quite transformative for us as a family. And again, people are coming and saying, but how do you do this? What do you do? What do you do? And the fascination women have had with cooking, something as you think as simple as cooking, has been absolutely fascinating. And so that's why I essentially set up this business as a support, as a service to these women who are so very busy, as a kind of cutting through the busyness, giving them support, the guidance, the compassion, and hopefully the community that a lot of these women are hungry for. So in terms of leadership, I'm certainly matriarch. I'm certainly on my way. I think I'm on my way to something quite big. I'm not quite sure what it is yet, but it's been an absolute delight starting this journey and going along this path. Roundabout way of answering your question. So leader in the micro, and we're going to see how it goes into the macro.
Absolutely. I'm on my way to something quite big. I love that.
Yes.
And you just described that so beautifully, and I can relate to what you said about being quite a lonely journey. And I remember when I was home with my two tiny little people, it was incredibly lonely. And what I know of you being at home, being the homemaker, cooking, you've got this absolute passion that I don't think I've seen before.
Thank you.
In doing the things that you enjoy doing this, and you love it, and you want to share it. And I remember it was this chore I needed, and I cooked everything for my babies when they were born. When it was appropriate, they ate what we ate. I cooked things from fresh, and I froze, and I made everything fresh. And I was kind of like this motor mom, I had to do everything right, and they had to have everything, because I didn't want to create a fussy eater, and I wanted them to have the best nutrition, and I did everything. But I remember being incredibly lonely, and I bought books to study, to learn, to cook properly and do everything right. But I did try to venture out into mother groups and mother and baby groups, and it didn't quite gel for me. But there was one occasion, and actually this is probably quite pivotal. I remember, so I had my firstborn, so she would have been about 18 months, and I took her
Yeah.
along to this mother and toddler group, which was the right thing to do, be a bit social. And there was another lady there, and I got chatting, and that this was in Ireland at the time, and hello, how are you? And how many children have you got? And I've got one. And this lady said she had 10, and this was her 10th baby. And I remember thinking,
Amazing.
but I remember thinking, I'm struggling with one. But it was lonely, and
Yeah,
it was lonely
yeah.
and isolating, but yeah, that was quite overwhelming at the time.
That's quite, and I remember with my first, I spoke to a lady who had 3. I think I was pregnant with my second. I'm like, how do you get anything done? And she said, bribery.
Yeah.
I bribe them into the car with a biscuit. I bribe them to bed with a biscuit. Just bribery, Zoe. And it was, but I think motherhood in many ways, or having lots of children, or just having children in general, it's like, it is a bit like life. If you remember back at school, you'd see the kids who were 3, 4 years older than you. Oh, I could never do that. Then you do your final exams at school. I could never do that. University, I could never do my finals. You join a business. I could never do whatever the next level is. And then gradually you get there. And I think that's also, yes, the same with motherhood, but we don't look at it, oddly, we don't look at it as a gradual process. I think maybe because when you have your first baby, bam,
Reality, right?
everything changes. Yeah.
But I think you do the very best you can in that
Oh,
moment,
goodness, yeah,
and I think
yeah.
sometimes, and you're tired, and I don't think your brain is as sharp as it possibly would be, but perhaps there are those moments where someone with 10 children, it isn't typical, is it? You don't often meet someone
Not so much
but
these days. Yeah.
but in that moment I was
Yeah.
thinking, how do you care for 10 children?
I
But
know.
anyway, it's just
Bless.
I know, but I was feeling, pretty overwhelmed with one. But I
Yeah.
went on to have another one. So as you say, I moved further on up the ladder.
It's the magic of hormones as well. The hormones make us forget. So
Yes, absolutely, sure do.
yeah.
So on that incredible journey that you've just described, were there any leaders or role models that inspired your style?
That inspired my style. So I'm going to give you an example. Many years ago, I worked in a quite high up gallery in Australia. And I was really struck by the difference between the curator I worked with and the chap who was in charge of this particular gallery. The chap who was in charge of the gallery, all he wanted to talk to, the only people he wanted to talk to were the high up ones, and the main funders, the wealthy people. Those are the people. He wouldn't even look at anyone else. The curator I work with knew everybody. He would talk to the painters of the temporary exhibition space and say, oh my God, Fred, how's your grandma? She was ill last week. How's she doing? Talk to the cleaning ladies. He would talk to librarians, the boss, everybody. He knew and spoke and was kind to everyone and treated them all the same. And I was only in my early 20s, and that really struck me, the difference between the love, genuine, yeah, I think I'm going to use that word, the genuine love everybody had for this curator, who was actually a very, very, very sensitive soul. And the contrast with it wasn't quite disrespect, but people did not have much, they weren't very keen on the chap running the show. And that always struck me. So I hope that every day you work on trying to be kind to people and meeting people where they're at and listening a lot. So I think that's kind of an important leadership lesson that's always stuck with me. Yeah. So hopefully I'm bringing that to my own business. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that management style or that leadership style has come up several times on this podcast about the qualities of a great leader, being able to talk to everyone in the business rather than the aloof and those in the high castle.
Ivory Tower? Ivory Tower.
That's what I'm trying to say.
That's it.
The Ivory Tower. For me, I've mentioned it before, there's a photograph of Barack Obama fist bumping the janitor, and that's the image I have in my mind of an incredible leader, and treating every human being as a valuable, important part of the process. And yeah, I agree with you there, that for me too is the shape of a great leader, someone that values everybody.
Yeah.
And it doesn't make you feel very good if you've got someone that just shuts himself away and, it's you're not important enough to talk to me.
Yeah, exactly. Because also, when push comes to shove, who is going to support that leader
Yeah.
over someone else,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it seems like quite a basic thing, but then, hey ho, doesn't seem to be. So
Interesting. And it is interesting because if the situation arises, and that person needs help, you've got two individuals and each person calls for help. How many people are going to run to each individual? And it's a measure, really, if you can go somewhere and say, I need help. And I know that I will get help if I need it. And I'm the same. If somebody needs help, I'll immediately go there. And it's just so interesting, that kind of environment. And it's simply you reap what you sow.
Yeah,
Isn't
yeah,
that it's
exactly.
purely that. And for
Exactly.
me, good communication, good leadership is all about building those relationships. And because it's very, very narrow minded just to think about the immediate sort of wins in front. So how important do you think communication is in leadership?
Well, I think it comes back to this point, doesn't it? It's being able to talk to kind of all levels, be it your client, be it your tech support, be it your own family members. I was talking to my husband the other day about the various gifts and temperaments that people can have. So if you are quite a sort of quiet, wanting to be at home, or even a nerdy type, do you know what you might have to work on getting out there? And we were talking earlier about one of the clients you've worked with, a lady who at the beginning of the process was absolutely terrified about public speaking and doing Instagram and Facebook lives. By the end of working with you, had that great confidence. But she knew it was a weakness she had to work on. In the same way, you can have somebody who is very sort of bold and out there and just says exactly what's in their mind. Do you know what? They might have to work on a little bit of prudence and temperance. So we all have things that we need to work on. The ideal is being able to communicate with everybody and being able to know when you have to say, be imperative, this has to happen, but also know when there are times you've got to step back and just be still. So I think even if you are not naturally inclined to that, it is something that you can work on, and it is something you can practice and get better at. So there you go. Those are my thoughts on communications.
And I think it helps as well to work with someone in your, someone around you that can give you that feedback in a constructive way.
Yes.
And sometimes you've got to be able to do it in a way that's going to help that individual without crushing their spirit.
Yeah, exactly. And there's where temperament comes in again. I mean, there's some people who would just wilt if you were blunt, but if you're saying it in whereas others are like, oh no, you raise a good point, I shall change.
Yes.
But yes, it's being able to handle those situations accordingly.
And to quote the young people today,
the youth
yes, to be able to flex in those situations. And I really like that. Yes, that's me being very modern.
Yes.
And sometimes, I know, for example, my communication style will differ depending on who I'm talking to. And sometimes I will need to be a little bit more flamboyant than I usually am, or sometimes I'll have to rein it in and listen better and change that style. But I know that I have that ability to flex the style. And that, I think, is a useful skill to be able to have, and it served me well because I can, in different situations. But that's a really interesting observation that you make, going from one end of the spectrum to the other. And we're all learning every day, and I spend a lot of time observing, and I watch people, how they do presentations, for example, or how, and I just love to watch the audience and how they're being received by the audience. And it is fascinating if you can just I like to step out of society and just watch.
Just be an observer. And I find that when I'm working with clients as well, is you might be working with somebody on a particular, I can't think of a precise example, but food and cooking, it is surprisingly raw. It can really, I use the word trigger. I don't like the word trigger, but I'll use it. It can trigger some really quite deep-seated wounds in people, or even kind of not just wounds, but also places that they just don't want to go. So when you're talking to people, when I'm working with people, I can feel, okay, do you know what? This is something that can't be pushed. Even though I might, coming in from the outside, I'm able to sort of see the systems within a household and go, okay, if you just did this, if you just did that, that would improve. But if somebody isn't ready to hear that, then I have the ability to go, right, that's not working. I need to gently step away, you know? So it's that reading of the room and knowing when I can support clients, when they're ready to be supported in particular things, and when they're not. It's it's fascinating. It's fascinating, all these kind of
it is, and
personal dynamics.
I'm very interested in what you said. It wouldn't have occurred to me to even put that situation together, you know, the kitchen setup and the emotional attachment to.
Yeah.
Wow,
I mean, it's really powerful. So I was talking to my mother, and I tease her gently. I say, so my mother, she comes from part of the Netherlands where they do gravy. Oh, the food, the meat, it's like all stews and gravy, and they have chips, and it's yum, exactly. Very Northern European yum. But she doesn't do a vegetable. She always goes, just not quite sure what to do with a vegetable. And I was talking to her about it because I'd always tease her, but I'm like, there's a reason for this. And I was talking to her, and she said, you know what, growing up, we just had vegetables in tins. We really just didn't have fresh vegetables. So I actually just don't know what to do with them. And so it's always an afterthought. So that was, again, very interesting. So you're catching the glimpse into people's upbringing in a way that you wouldn't have. So there's also cultural elements about it. I remember, sorry, going to take the tone down a little bit, but I remember listening to an interview about the children of Holocaust survivors, and how this particular family, the children were really, they'd moved to America by this point, but the kids were really fat. And that was because the poor mother and the father had, gone through awful things. One father had been, the father, I think, been hiding in the woods in Belarus away from the Nazis. So he hadn't eaten anything. And now they were in this land of abundance. There was still that fear of, what if this is taken away? Eat, eat, eat. You have to eat. You must eat. You've got to eat because I couldn't. So it's been really, so that's always, randomly stuck with me all these years. And now I'm working in the kitchen, which is also such an intimate space. It'd be a bit like going into somebody's bathroom in some ways, because people will open the drawer and go, oh my gosh, my cutlery drawer is really messy. It doesn't matter for me. Well, it doesn't matter, but people, it's again an intimate space, and it's such a privilege to be invited in and work with people and support them and guide them and say, right, this is your situation. Let's bring glory to this situation, whatever it is, So food is a very, very interesting thing, and brings up some food and cooking. It brings up some incredible emotions, and it is a space of great tenderness where I am really trying my best to tread gently, but also bring joy into those moments. And the people who ask me to come and work with them or come to the workshops I organize, the people who come know that they want more joy again, that they need help, and they want things to change. And that's such a privilege to be able to work with these families.
Wow, that's amazing. I've just thought of the title of your book, by the way. It should be
thank you.
Stories, and you need to talk about that. But you just made me think, because we talked before we started recording, and as you were talking there, I thought of my grandmother who passed away a year and a half ago, and I adored her. And if anyone ever asked me about her, how I described her would be this: my granny can make a massive meal out of nothing. She had 12 children, and amazing. There would be always food on the table. And if I landed there with my friend or whatever, there was a bowl of stew and there was food handed. And and it's just so interesting, that food story. And I hadn't made the connection until I was listening to you talk about those previous stories. And we used to stay over a lot, and we'd wake up in the morning and she would have made fresh scones, and
amazing.
And I was, to me, that was love, and the smell. Now if I make scones at home, that takes me right back. But I'm amazed you've bewitched me into this.
It's true. it's true. It's such a visceral thing. I mean, I'm slowly reading my way through the Old Testament at the moment, and constantly food, smells,
Yeah,
hospitality, family. This is just one of the fundamentals of what it is to be human.
yeah.
You know, it's
Mhm.
huge. It's really huge. Yeah. So yes,
Wow.
but
And even just briefly, my own children, when they were little,
mhm.
their treat, I used to make French toast. And it's probably not how French toast is made, it was how I made it. And it was their big treat. And if it was their
Mhm.
birthday, I'd get up and I'd make this French toast. So now they're older and they can do a lot of these things themselves. That's
Mhm.
what they make for themselves. And
Oh
it's
yeah,
endlessly fascinating for
yeah,
me that they
yeah.
will, and I think, wow, it's
That's continued on. It's continued
yes,
on. Yeah, that's beautiful. It's beautiful because it's love. That's
yeah.
the special treat. And I'm making this for you. Food is
Hmm.
love. Food
Hmm.
is love. Yeah, it
Oh,
really
wow.
is. Really
Thank you,
is.
Zoe. I hadn't even considered all of that, but I think what you do is fascinating. But there's your book right there. So,
Thank you. Thank you. I'll squeeze that in amongst everything else.
definitely. So about we'll talk about your audience now because you've got this
Yeah.
beautiful business and I've said to you before, your emails are just beautiful to read and look at.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Stunning. So how comfortable are you with your audience? Are you comfortable speaking in public and going on social media? How do you feel in that realm?
Okay, so I'm quite comfortable speaking to people in public. So I'm quite happy to do that. I'm quite happy to do podcasts, Instagram lives, this sort of thing, because it's conversation that I really, really I do enjoy very much. Social media like Instagram itself, the reels I find ever so draining. Ever so draining. I much prefer the writing, and again this contact, this relationship, whereas I feel social media, and again we were talking about tech before we
Mhm.
started, how why is it you have a system that seems to be working and then the tech people come in, and by that I mean Silicon Valley, and they come in and they fiddle with it.
Yeah.
Why?
Hmm.
So yes, yeah, I'm not sure if that sort of answers your question, but yes, I suppose these kind of conversations I thoroughly enjoy and enjoy doing. Yes.
And it's interesting because you talked about reels and it's something that you get told, oh, you must do reels, you must do this. And they're
Uh,
so kind of scripted and choreographed and you want to get it
mm,
just right. And
mm,
what I loved about these podcasts, they're not scripted. I
no.
have a couple of questions that
Yeah.
to lead the
Yeah.
conversation, but it's 100% real. It's
Yeah.
just a conversation. And the way I describe it is it's like listening to a conversation on a train.
Yeah.
And we're just going right back to the very basics of communication. And
Yeah. Yeah.
it's so interesting to me that podcasts are so popular, but it's the bare bones of communication, the
Yeah.
very basics of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. And I think as well, what's been really interesting with the podcast space, and I've been listening to podcasts, probably about 15, 16 years,
Goodness.
for a long time, because the BBC at one point, Radio 4 started doing its radio programs as podcasts, and then it just all sort of changed. So I've been doing this for a long time. But what's been so beautiful to listen to has been the long form, again, conversations. And this is what people are hungry for rather than the
Hmm.
sound bites,
Hmm.
because it is, do you know what a thought struck me? And I'm going to apply this to women, because as women, we generally like a chat. And coming back to the loneliness of mothers, there isn't necessarily the community around us with which to have a chat. And I do wonder, because to say men like YouTube, that's if you look at the stats, it's like 70%, 80% men are on YouTube. They like the visual. Women, we're doing things and listening and to the
Hmm.
chat.
Yeah.
So I do wonder if podcasts in a way are a substitute for that community, because we don't have the families around us anymore in the same
Hmm.
way we did.
Hmm.
I wonder if people are still doing that. They're still hungry for that learning. They're still hungry for the stories. They're still hungry for that connection to a bigger thing. And podcasts are filling that.
Interesting.
Mm.
Interesting. And I've just described it as listening to a conversation on a
Yeah.
train,
Yeah.
which is,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, it's so interesting. No, let's see if we get any feedback on it. But
Yeah. No,
yeah,
yeah,
interesting point of
bring
view.
it on. It'd be really, really
Yeah.
interesting to see.
Yeah.
So yes, so there we
Yeah.
go.
The
My
podcast
thoughts.
habits are interesting to me because I'm the same as you. It's I multitask. Yeah, if I'm
Mm.
listening to podcasts, I'm putting laundry away or I'm doing something else, and yeah, it's just that constant something on the go. But you can listen to it and do something else, and
Yeah.
I do like to listen to a conversation, and you kind of feel like you're part of it. So
Yeah, exactly. And I think if you're doing something with your hands as well as whilst you're listening,
mhm.
there must be something there about muscle memory and listening to things. I think there's something in there. But yes, it's important. It
Yes,
is important.
absolutely.
Yes.
So, what legacy do you hope to leave as a leader, and how do you measure the impact of your leadership? That's a tricky question.
Oh my goodness, I'm going day by day. As long as my children get to bed alive,
Yes.
I'm winning.
Yes, you're winning.
Honestly, I'm winning. Legacy, do you know, every family that I can help, if it means that I can help a family, that means they are then sitting together, eating more healthily, having more time together, and then that gets passed on to the next generation.
Mm.
Then, even if it's one or two families, that the ripple effects can be huge. So, do I want to be Grand High Empress of all the world? No. If I can change, if I can help a few families,
Mhm.
then that would be wonderful.
Absolutely. I'm
Yeah.
going to be thinking about what you said about the vegetables for a while, because it
Yes.
wasn't around my head, because growing up in Ireland, it's the vegetables were everything. It was the staple of everything. And I can't imagine a life where vegetables came in tins and it
Yeah, I know.
wasn't
I
formed.
find it fascinating. I hadn't
Yeah.
realized, because I just presumed that, we're talking that there would be vegetables. I just presumed that, but apparently not. There's a lot of meat though, and excellent meat. And my
Yes.
mother is when it comes to steaks, when it comes
Yeah, I'm
to
sure.
roast, she's the queen. She's the
Yeah.
absolute queen, not
Yeah.
vegetables. So
So interesting.
yeah.
So where can we find out more about you and your business online? And I will put all these in the show notes.
Thank you. Thank you. So you can find me at realliferealkitchen.com. And I've also put together a free mini email course and ebook. I've called it the 7-Day Pantry Challenge, where you get one ingredient a day and 3 ways with each of those ingredients. So it's encouraging people who feel quite restricted by a recipe to get creative in the kitchen, opening the cupboard and going, haha, I see you, lentils, and then magic things happen. So that'll also be in the show notes for people to sign up to. But yes, you can find me also on Instagram at Real Life Real Kitchen, and hopefully I will see you all there.
That is lovely. I'm going to do your challenge, and perhaps I should blog it.
Oh, thank you very much. I'd love that. Thank you. Thank you.
Because
Thank you.
I am not a cook, but I do try. And weirdly, I had this conversation at work, something similar.
Yeah.
My heart's in the right place. I want to were my exact words.
I want to. I love it. I love it. Yes.
I do. I try, and I can bake. I make scones and copy my granny, and I can do.
Yeah.
You're just making me think of so many things. I can bake scones. I can make stews. I can do
Amazing.
soda bread. I
Wow.
can do all the Irish stuff.
Oh my goodness. You're winning. You're winning already. Do you actually need anything else though? That is the question.
Well, I probably should cook something a bit more not Irish. But I will do your challenge, and I will blog it. But yes, absolutely check those out in the show notes, and check out Zoe's emails. They truly are beautiful. But thank you so much for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure. Again, I could talk all night. It's just been wonderful.
It's been a delight. Thank you so much. Thank you, Amanda. Just wonderful. Thank you.
And thank you for joining me. Thank you for spending time with us today, and special thanks to my lovely guest, Zoe Willis. Are you afraid to go live on social media, but you need to increase your visibility to get more sales? Don't miss my free 3-step formula and never be afraid to go live on social media again. You can find the link in the podcast notes, as well as the links that Zoe mentioned in the podcast. Join me on the next episode for more tips, tricks and insights. You can follow me on Instagram at Coach Amanda Jane, or visit my website amandajane.co.uk. Bye for now.